I truly believe that some of the most bone-chilling stories are the ones that have never been told. If you think about it, those that are able to recollect and tell their stories are the reason folklore exists at all. The dead are limited in their ability to transcribe the series of events that led them to where they rest today. I think that in itself is a terrifying aspect of the unknown. Without the knowledge passed on by those braver than you, you're just as blind as they were, while they were still alive. I died a good while back, on the highway while heading back home. For the last 3 or so years, I've been stuck in this place that isn't heaven or hell. Maybe it's purgatory. I'm not entirely sure. All I know is that I've been stuck driving on the same road that I died on for the last 3 years. While I can step out of my utility vehicle and walk around, there's not really a point, as my surroundings are dark and desolate. If everything wasn't illuminated by either my headlights or the faint, otherworldly hue, then I would be faced with unimaginable darkness. It's not entirely empty either. Driving along, I see things ranging from crashed vehicles, my own vehicle and body nearly unrecognizably mangled in the middle of the road, or roadkill that walks and hops despite broken bones and huge chunks of flesh missing from their bodies. While I do see the occasional human being, I try my best to avoid them. I find that newcomers are the most prone to violent bouts of aggression as they go through the 5 stages of grief in here. I've only ever let one other person into my vehicle in the last 3 years, and it's a mistake that I will never make again. It all started as I was heading home late one night. Looking back on it, I should have just pulled over and slept, or napped, or anything. But overconfidence pushed me to drive 7 hours home, despite not having slept in the last 2 days. I had multiple coffees and energy drinks, and stopped occasionally to piss and splash my face with cold water, but I was still feeling myself slipping the whole way. My ego wouldn't let me sleep on the side of the road due to how uncivilized it seemed, and my fear wouldn't let me, as I imagined teens, thieves, or worse, catching me while I slept. Now, not only do I sleep in my vehicle in the infinite blackness of the void, I hear things outside scratching and tapping at my doors and windows, eager to come inside. I was about 2/3 of the way home when I closed my eyes far longer than I should have. Though it was night while I was heading home, when I awoke, I could immediately tell that something wasn't right. It's the same feeling you get when you're lucid dreaming, that awareness that everything around you isn't real as you float listlessly in your thoughts. I stepped out of my vehicle with the headlights still on as I gathered myself. I felt fuzzy, sort of when your limbs that fell asleep start receiving circulation again, and the pins and needles fade away. It was that feeling, but constant across my entire body. I felt cold, but I couldn't really feel my surroundings. I think that's when it really dawned on me. I couldn't hear anything or feel anything around me. Sure, I could hear my heartbeat and pinch my skin, but everything else was just numb. I saw my decimated vehicle in the middle of the road, looking like crumbled up wrapping paper. I remember my first time seeing it vividly because it was essentially just behind my vehicle, as the faint red glow of my rear lights revealed it in an ominous glow. I didn't need to get too close to see my body torn in half, splayed over the bonnet and steering wheel like a doll. My bones protruded out of my arms, legs, and torso, while my head looked partially caved in. From the way it looked, I have to think that I swerved into a truck coming in the opposite lane. My hypothesis was based on how my vehicle went from looking like a terrier to a pug, with a noticeable amount of damage present to the frame that couldn't be the result of a hatchback or a sedan collision. Though in all honesty, I have no idea what exactly happened, just that I hit someone's vehicle, and that I died while he survived. Something that I realized quickly was that my truck didn't require fuel. Not only that, as long as I kept it on the road and avoided hitting the living roadkill and other hazards, my vehicle can keep going forever. I didn't need food, but anything I found that I could eat comforted me, despite not feeling hungry or full afterwards. One thing I realized on the second or third person I ran into was that you should never, under any circumstances, attempt to make a U-turn and drive back the way you came. You should and can only drive forward. If you realized you've left something behind, just get over it, because you're not getting it back. While I was still new, I met this Asian fella looking at his own body that had propelled itself from his windshield to about 5 meters away from his car. His suit ripped in tatters as a trail of blood and flesh bits followed a meter or two back. I could grimly imagine what the front of his body looked like as it was grated against the rough tar road. Where am I?" he blurted. It was easy to tell that English wasn't his first language, so I spoke as calmly, coherently, and slowly as possible. "I'm sorry, mate, but you're dead," I said bluntly. No, can't be." He looked around, both at his original wrecked car and the one he had parked on the opposite side of the highway. "Where is she?" "Where?" he asked, as he approached me with his wallet opened. Inside was a picture of himself and what I assumed to be his daughter, no older than 6 or 7. "She must be alive still. I'd consider yourself lucky," I replied. At this point, he started speaking either Chinese or Vietnamese. I couldn't really tell, and got back in his car. I saw him make a U-turn and head the opposite way. I watched as he drove out to where I could only faintly see his headlights, before seeing the faint silhouette of his car falling as though it was pushed off a cliff. For a brief second, I swore I could see his headlights shine from under the ground as he spiraled and spun before melting into the void. I can't imagine what happens if you manage to die here too. Maybe it's complete void like a dreamless sleep. Or maybe you do end up in heaven or hell, and this is just an awkward pit stop to the great beyond. I haven't the faintest clue what awaits me. Maybe it's better than this place. Maybe it's worse. My greatest fear is that beyond this, there is simply nothing at all. I try not to think about that while I'm driving, but the thought comes and goes as easily as the bloody kangaroos that litter the highway. At this point, you may be thinking to yourself, how exactly am I posting these if I'm dead? To be completely honest, I have no idea if these are going to reach anybody really. My phone still works and the battery doesn't drop no matter how long I use it. I can't seem to get into YouTube or Spotify though, which is a shame. Since there's this podcast I really like listening to when I was driving to and from home. I can post things on websites, but when I check homepages or anything, my phone freaks the fuck out and I have to shut it down and start it up again to make it work. The first time I did that, I was shitting myself thinking I lost the ability to look at my kids' texts. But after it turned on again, I realized it was fine and everything was still on it. Driving becomes its own hell when you can't listen to anything. I'd take listening to shitty radio stations than nothing at all. The silence just leaves you with your thoughts, or it highlights a rattle you didn't think was there before, so now you can't stop hearing it. Before realizing that my existence depends on looking at the road, I would check my phone while driving, scrolling through old messages, trying to send messages only to encounter an error, or listen to videos I had saved on my camera roll. Another thing you gotta do is to always keep your eyes on the road. Always. Because there is some strange shit in here that isn't animal or human. I was looking through pictures I took of a cruise with my now ex-wife, as I caught something from the corner of my eye. At first I thought I was seeing an impossibly large wombat, but its hair was dark and smooth-looking, almost glistening like it was wet. Of course, my first instinct was to stay on my phone and drive around it, as even if I did manage to hit it, I've hit the living roadkill in here before and they just get right back up after going under my tires. But as soon as I looked back down at my phone, in the middle of the cruise picture I was looking at, I saw that thing, and it looked like it was getting closer. My eyes fell back onto the road, where I saw it looking directly at me, its eyes indescribably bright as I quickly swerved around it. Its eyes now burned into mine as I felt its bold gaze linger in front of me for a few minutes before dissipating. Something about its eyes, and the way it looked at me, felt eerily familiar. I near about had a panic attack afterwards as my memory of the thing seemed to deteriorate after passing it. I see it now glaring at me from outside my window in the dark fields on my left. So unless I want more glaring at me, I'll do my best and keep my eyes on the road. I've yet to find a bottle-o here, though if I'm lucky, I'll find strangers with slabs full of beer. This year, I saw a guy in a small hatchback parked on the side of the road. Now, usually I'm very wary of others, both in life and wherever this was. But at that point, I hadn't spoken to anyone for weeks, and I wasn't feeling great after dealing with the last person I met in here. I didn't care though, and parked up a bit behind them and greeted them. I approached a young man, curly hair, couldn't be older than 25. I'm sure my 40-year-old ass was intimidating as I saw him back away when I greeted him. "Hey mate, you new here?" He looked me up and down as his hand felt behind him for his door handle. "Sorry to bother you, I just want to talk." He kept grabbing at the handle, unable to get it open. He turned away from me and began furiously pulling at the door handle. If he wasn't built like a twig, I would have rooted for him pulling the door off its hinges. Instead, he gave up and ended up running into the darkness. I called out to him, as there was no way I'm going out into that abyss with no vehicle or light. "It's your funeral, mate. I just wanted to talk. Don't let the ghouls get you," I chortled. Sometimes I get so bored I amuse myself. I peered into his small black hatchback. He was lucky that cars don't really break down here, 'cause his black shitbox barely passed as a paddock basher. It was old, very old, with stained seats and a whole lot of trash on the floor. Hidden in the back seat, I could see a slab of beer partially covered in a blue tarp. I checked each door before realizing he locked himself out of his car. I couldn't help but feel bad for the guy, so I decided to help him out. I think the slab is more than adequate payment. I don't know if I imagined being drunk or if the alcohol actually had an effect on me, but that was the best day I had in weeks. This old road extends beyond reality itself. Sometimes the memories of what once was leaks into this place, dotting the sides of this barren highway. These memories take the forms of locations, old gas stations, small homes. All of them seem to find their way here eventually. That's where I managed to grab my food and beer from. I fondly remember finding the servo I used to visit as a kid on the side of the highway. I parked my vehicle near the rusted pumps and headed inside. The place was almost exactly how I remembered it, with a barrel of lollipops near the registers, bottles of energy drink and cold coffee in the dark fridges, and the slushy machine right next to the warmers full of meat pies and sausage rolls. Sadly, the place was rather dilapidated. Not completely run down, mind you. Best I can describe it is when a store hasn't been cleaned in a day, and you're the last one there as everyone else has gone home. There wasn't any power, but the otherworldly hue from the ground illuminated the place just enough for me to make out my surroundings. There was plenty of snacks and canned drinks ripe for the taking, though just as I was stuffing my pockets and hands with as much as I could carry, I heard something else enter the building. I looked up at the dirty safety mirror in the top corner as I saw a large, shadowy figure enter. It moved unnaturally, struggling on horse-like legs. It was frail, moving with great weight, dripping dark ichor onto the ground below it. It looked up and faced the mirror, looking at me with those bright, ineffable eyes. The thing was following me, and I saw no reason in sticking around. I managed to sneak over the counter and quietly went out the employee fire exit before booking it to my vehicle. I started it up and left, seeing the thing looking at me in my rearview mirror. I made sure to carry my hunting knife with me each time I explored from then on. That, whatever it is, isn't the only thing that creeps me out. Though they are hard to see, you can occasionally spot concealed driveways and dirt roads leading to gates branching off the main highway. I was still relatively new when I first came across one of them. Now I try my best not to look at them as I pass them by. Back then, my curiosity got the best of me, and I got out to look at where it led to. The dirt road led to a meter-tall gate with rusted barbed wire and poles stretching endlessly into the darkness. On the gate was a large wooden sign painted in red and black that simply read, "The Bend." I took a squiz just past the gate and saw the edge of the world. A few meters past the gate led to a sheer drop that sunk into nothingness. As I was standing out there, I swore I could faintly hear whispers in the darkness, though when I looked around, nothing was there. At least, nothing I could see anyways. I think I checked 2 other side roads after that one. Those roads went a bit further than my light could reveal, but I got a real bad feeling from them. The last one I saw looked exactly like the gate outside the home of an old friend of mine. He died about 10 years back in a car accident. I don't like checking them anymore. I drove for a while with the first person I met here. He went by Shane, and he seemed pretty experienced. He was a bit skinnier, wearing a blue flannel and a dark Stetson hat. If everything he said was true, then he is the only man I know who has survived the longest in here. His vehicle was filled with rifles, chains, hunting knives, and a few first aid kits. Funnily enough, my first meeting with the guy was having his gun pointed at my head. Being the scared newcomer I was, I let him do whatever he wanted. After searching my vehicle from top to bottom, he went to his vehicle to grab something. The hand that once carried the gun that was pressed against my temple now had a cold beer in it. "Sorry, mate, I had to check for any yowies," he said gruffly. I was nervous at first, but I took the offering and cracked it open. I remember asking a whole lot of useless questions like, "What is this place? Why are we here?" Shit like that. "What do you mean, yowies?" I finally asked, to which he gave a wide, toothless grin. "They're the things that wander around here. I reckon you'll find one soon enough. Big, dark things that ooze." He pulled the sleeve on his right hand, showing a missing index finger that once connected to a black stub. He mumbled quietly, "Ooze that's cold and wet, but it burns. It sucks and it burns. Dreamlike things, lost spirits that have lost themselves in this place." I wasn't sure how much of his ramblings were of real events, or half-imagined ones. I just knew not to belittle the man who could blow a clean hole through my brains. Though it wasn't stated outright, I felt obligated to follow Shane. That and he made me drive before him, whether it was so it was easier to shoot me, or if it was for my vehicle to protect his for whatever was out there, I'm still unsure of. He forced me into old houses that manifested on the side of the highway. Each time he asked me, "Do these look familiar to you?" Each time he did, I said no. All of the houses seemed foreign to me. Some were brick, others were timber, all of them old-fashioned. They had a late 60s, vintage style, accompanied by classic cars outside. They looked as if someone picked up a house in the middle of the country and dropped them right next to the highway. Shane would push me inside, gun poking my back, as he made me scout them out. I checked them room by room, giving updates and giving him anything I managed to find as he waited outside. Each of those homes were falling apart, wallpaper peeling off like sunburnt skin, and mold sprawled across the ceiling and walls. I was hoping that there'd be a weapon I could use to defend myself, though the most I could find were old kitchen knives and potato mashers. Still, I held on to the hope that I would be free of Shane at some point, but those first few weeks were tough, as he had some quirks that made him a pain to be around. Besides his eagerness to apply violence to yield morbid gains, he was extremely opinionated and had an extremely short fuse. He kept going on to how all the good jobs were being outsourced, despite the fact that we're both dead now. I usually just nodded and pretend to agree with most of what he said. The only good thing about having him around was that it made the time go by quicker, but time holds no meaning here, so I'm not sure how much worth that has anymore. He told me a little about how he ended up here, not that I had a choice in the matter. When someone has your life in their hands and asks you, "Do you want to hear a story?" the safest thing to say is yes. Best case scenario, he just keeps yapping and ignores your input. He was a hunter that would sneak into large properties to hunt game, primarily deer and boars in the dead of night. He had caught a sow and 3 piglets. He had them chained in the back of his vehicle, and driving along the highway when he caught on to police lights from his rear, he sped up trying to evade them before eventually being caught. The police cruiser parked right in front of him, giving him enough time to give the bastard what he deserved. In what I can only assume was a fit of blind rage, he had shot the cop right where he stood, and realizing the consequences of his actions, got back into his vehicle and started speeding home. He didn't even make it a kilometer down the M1 when a kangaroo jumped out and collided with him. sending him down into a creek where he drowned. Hearing that story explained why his vehicle always seemed damp and smelled the way it did. I think I put up with him for about 3 weeks before something significant happened. We were searching inside this house together, and this time he came in with me as opposed to just waiting outside like he usually did. I just figured he was bored and wanted a change of scenery, but something about how he was looking around the place and moved through its withered halls made me think that it was something more significant to him. I was going down this dark hallway, as he was the only one allowed to hold one of his many flashlights, when I heard him make this loud, almost feminine shriek. I turned around and watched this huge dark creature grab a hold of him from under an old bed. Its arm was huge but thin, with stringent muscle connecting to its shriveled forearm. He had dropped his gun and flashlight as he was crawling and gouging at the timber floorboards underneath him, his nails ripping out of his hands, sticking out of the floorboards as his screams filled those hallowed halls.
"Fucking help me, John, you useless shit!"
he screamed and whined. He looked at me with this desperation that almost made me consider saving him. I immediately reached for the gun and torch. Seeing as I still had the opportunity, I raised the worn rifle up, aimed, and fired into Shane's side. He coughed up blood as he glared at me, pain and anger pooling in his dark eyes as he was pulled under the bed. I let that thing keep his body as I ran to my vehicle and drove off, laughing the whole way like old bloody Saint Nick. I was reborn, molted by newfound freedom, my head throbbing as the adrenaline wore off. I remember the feeling of liberation I had when I was finally free of him. But until then I was fearful, not just because he had a gun pointed at me most of the time, but by the thought of what waited for me beyond this place. I think that was the catalyst for my intrigue into the after life. I reflected a lot after dealing with Shane. If he taught me anything, it was that in this place you only have 2 options. You either pass on to whatever awaits us beyond, or you keep going, trying to find meaning on this long, dark road that never ends. I thought I found meaning in Julie. I came across this younger lady, who was the first woman I had seen in here, and I spotted her crying on the side of the road in front of her blue sedan. She looked like she was in her mid-30s, with silky dark hair and these bright brown eyes. I had gotten out of my car to greet her, as she ran up to me and gripped onto my flannel.
"What is this place? Where's my husband? Where's my son?"
She spoke between sobs as she beat her fists against my chest. I looked over at the car wreck sprawled across the road, the debris scattered farther than my headlights could show. If you didn't come here with the same car you died in, I wouldn't have had the faintest idea of what type of car she was driving. It was so badly mangled and compact that it looked like it was used in those test trials where they smash cars against a wall at hundreds of kilometers an hour. I stood there rather awkwardly looking back at it. As history can attest to, I was not the best at consoling women in distress. I just let her get her feelings out before she looked up at me with wet, red eyes. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you've passed on. If your husband and child aren't here, then I can only assume that they are still alive," I said as compassionately as I could manage. I didn't have the heart to tell her what condition they must have been in. I've seen people wheelchair-bound after car accidents, and one who laid in a coma until their family pulled the plug on them after half a decade. I'm not sure what it waits for those who pass outside this road, but I can only imagine how her spouse and son had survived such a mess. I gave her a rundown of everything I knew inside her sedan, what my theories were, still banking on this being some sort of purgatory, what ghouls I have seen roaming around. I mentioned the story of the guy doing a U-bolt but didn't tell her about Shane, as I didn't want to scare her with the threat that man still posed in this place. "That's all I know so far. I wish you the best. I may not see you again when I leave and—" "Wait!" she blurted out before her voice dropped to a whisper. "Please, can I ride with you?" I sat in my vehicle and boiled over on the idea. I wasn't sure how big of a risk it was bringing someone else. Maybe that thing that killed Shane was only there because we were both in the house at the same time. There were too many unknowns and what-ifs to make a rational decision. At the time, I had to consider that after each stranger I passed, I never saw them on the road again. Would it be so bad to have some better company on the road? Sure, I stated. Just stay behind me. If I go before you, then it gives you a chance to escape if something happens to me. She hugged me after I said that, and for a second, I considered hugging her back. The temptation was strong, but I settled with a firm pat on the back. Maybe I'll talk more about her once I have more beer. I'm not sure if anyone will see this, but writing all this down has helped out a lot. Plus, it's a breath of fresh air as opposed to driving endlessly on the road. Until then, I plan on driving and hopefully finding another slab. If I pray, then hopefully I can manifest a drive through Bottle O and grab enough grog to forget everything. Maybe the key to leaving this place is to get absolutely smashed. That's the dream anyways. I'll write more down if I feel like it.